Welcome to the unofficial Cockroach channel. Today's story is crazy. To begin with, the relationship between relatives when they get too close always ends up causing some noise. So click the like button, and without further ado, let's get to the story. A childhood marked by the shadows. For as long as I can remember, my parents have always preferred my brother, Marcus. He was the pride of the family, the firstborn, the one who always seemed to do everything right. While I, Terry, was the second son, the one who always remained in the shadows, invisible. My childhood was marked by a feeling of exclusion that grew with each passing year. No matter what I did, my efforts never seemed to be enough to gain my parents' attention or affection. Marcus, on the other hand, shone in everything. He was excellent in studies, sports, and, above all, he knew exactly how to please our parents. I wondered if they had ever looked at me with the same pride they looked at him. Even when I tried to win their approval, whether it was a good grade or a small success, the response was always the same, a comparison with Marcus's performance. I vividly remember the day I won a medal in a school essay contest. I ran home, eager to show my parents. I walked through the front door, holding the medal, a smile on my face, hoping that for a moment I could be the center of attention. But before I could say a word, my mother casually commented, "That's great, Terry. But did you know that Marcus has been invited to a national math competition?" My heart sank. It was always like that. No matter what I did, Marcus always did something better or more impressive. And my parents never hid their preference. While Marcus had elaborate birthday parties, I received modest, almost forgettable celebrations. While he received praise for every small accomplishment, I received veiled criticism or a simple nod. Over time, I learned to stop trying. If they couldn't see me, there was no longer any reason to seek validation. I began to build my own world, far from my parents' critical gaze and Marcus' shadow. Adulthood and estrangement. The years passed, and the emotional distance I felt as a child grew as I became an adult. Marcus, naturally, followed a brilliant path. He graduated with honors, got an excellent job at a multinational company, and was the pride of my parents. They were always talking about him, about his achievements, his career, his grand projects. I, on the other hand, followed a different path. I chose a less conventional career, something that made me truly happy, but that didn't have the prestige my parents expected. I never regretted my choice, but I knew that, in their eyes, I was just the child gone wrong. When I met Anna, the woman who would become my wife for the first time in my life, I felt that I had something that Marcus couldn't take away from me. Anna loved me for who I was, for the man I had become, and not for the idea of success or perfection. She understood the wounds I carried, but she encouraged me to be strong, to build a happy life, even without my parents' support. The wedding was the end of the little relationship I still had with my parents. When I announced that I was getting married, their reaction was indifferent. My father simply said, "Oh, that's great," while my mother asked if Marcus would come to the wedding. That was enough for me to understand that they didn't really care. The wedding day arrived, and I didn't see my parents among the guests. I didn't formally invite them, but I thought that maybe, just maybe, they would show up, make a gesture of goodwill, show that deep down they still cared. But they didn't show up. Not even a congratulatory message. It was as if, at that moment, I had finally ceased to exist for them. That night, after the party, Anna held my hand and said to me, "We're a family now, Terry, and we're going to be happy, even if your parents aren't around." I nodded, knowing she was right, but I couldn't help the empty feeling that grew in my chest. As much as I tried to move on, there was a part of me that still yearned for the approval that never came. Pregnancy and a secret. Time passed, and Anna and I began to build our life together. We had our challenges, but we were happy. The love we shared was deep, and it was with great joy that, a year after our wedding, we discovered that Anna was pregnant. The news that I was going to be a father filled me with a happiness I had never experienced before. It was as if I could finally create my own family, a family where love and attention would be shared equally, where there would be no preferences or shadows. However, as Anna and I planned our son's future, I realized that I didn't want to tell my parents anything. They had grown so distant that the idea of sharing this joy with them seemed strange, almost forced. Besides, a part of me felt that if they didn't care about my marriage, why would they care about my son? I decided not to tell them. I didn't send messages, I didn't make calls. I just kept quiet, letting my life go on without them being there. Anna, as always, supported me in this decision. She knew how much my parents had hurt me, and understood my need to keep this distance. The months passed, and as Anna's belly grew, so did the anticipation for the birth of our son. We organized the baby's room, chose a name, and dreamed about the future. It was a moment of pure happiness, a complete contrast to the pain I felt when I thought about the years that had passed. The unexpected reunion. Everything was going well until the day I unexpectedly received a message from my mother. She rarely texted me, and when she did, it was always something casual, without much real interest in my life. But this time it was different. The message said, "Terry, we need to talk. It's important. Please come see us." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to ignore the message, to go on with my life without involving them. But something about the way she wrote it intrigued me. Maybe it was just another attempt to remember Marcus, but curiosity got the better of me. Against my better judgment, I decided to go to their house. When I arrived, I was greeted by an awkward silence. My mother led me into the living room, where my father was already sitting. Both of their faces looked tense, and I knew immediately that something was wrong. "Terry, we need to talk about Marcus," my mother began, her tone more serious than I had ever heard it. I sat up, trying to hide my discomfort. "What's wrong with him?" My father cleared his throat, looking nervous. "He's in trouble. Serious trouble. And we don't know what to do." That took me by surprise. Marcus, the perfect son, in trouble? I didn't know how to react, but I listened silently as they explained. The unexpected request. As my parents began to explain, a sense of strangeness washed over me. Marcus, the exemplary son, was facing problems I could never have imagined. Apparently, he had gotten involved in risky business dealings and mounting debts, in addition to a marital crisis. My parents' perfect son, who had always been on top, was now on the verge of collapse. My mother, with tears in her eyes, looked at me. "Terry, we don't know what to do. Marcus won't listen to us, and things are out of control. We need help." I took a deep breath. It was ironic to hear that after so many years of being ignored and underestimated, I, the invisible son, was now being asked to help the favorite son out of a hole he dug himself. For a moment, I thought about getting up and leaving, letting them solve their problems on their own, like they did with me for so long. But something stopped me. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, my voice colder than I intended. My mother sighed, sounding hesitant. "Because you have a stable life, Terry. You are successful, happily married, and we thought maybe you could talk to Marcus, help him get back on his feet." I looked at them in disbelief. "You want me to help Marcus, after everything that's happened? You never cared about my life, my marriage, and now you expect me to fix his mistakes." My father, who had been silent until then, finally spoke. "Terry, we know we've made mistakes, but Marcus needs help, and you're the only person who can do it." There was a note of desperation in his voice that made me realize how serious the situation was. Still, the anger I'd been carrying for years didn't go away so easily. "Do you think I don't have my own life to deal with? That I don't have problems or responsibilities?" They were silent, and for a moment, the weight of our family history seemed to hang over us. Finally, I stood up. "I don't know what they expect of me, but that's not my responsibility. Marcus made his choices, just like you made yours." Without waiting for an answer, I left the house. The cold night wind touched my face as I walked toward the car, feeling a mixture of relief and guilt. Part of me knew that I had no obligation to help them, but another part, the deepest part, questioned whether I could simply turn my back on my own family. Reflections and the difficult choice. In the days that followed, I kept reflecting on the meeting with my parents. Marcus's situation, their expectations, and, of course, the past that I was trying to leave behind. Anna noticed that something was bothering me and asked what had happened. I told her the whole story, from the conversation with my parents to the frustrations that had accumulated over the years. "You don't have to do anything you don't want to do, Terry," she said, ever so sensible. "You've tried so hard, and they've never acknowledged it. But I also understand that it can be hard to just ignore what's happening." I knew she was right. I had no obligation to help Marcus, especially after so many years of rejection. But at the same time, this was my family, and despite everything, the guilt still weighed heavily. Could I live with the decision to do nothing, knowing that I could have helped? As these thoughts tormented me, unexpected news arrived. Anna was pregnant. The joy I felt upon learning that we were going to be parents was indescribable. Finally, I would have my own family, a new chance to do things right, to create an environment of love and support that I had never had. But with this joy also came the doubt. Did I want my parents to be a part of my son's life? Did they, who had never really been there for me, deserve to be part of this new chapter? The answer seemed to Anna no. I didn't need them to create my own family. Anna and I were enough, and our son would be loved and valued in a way I never was. But at the same time, I knew that the weight of the past would not easily disappear. The unexpected revelation. A few weeks later, I received a joint message from my parents. This time, it was not about Marcus. The subject was the family inheritance. They explained that, considering that I was already well off financially and that Marcus was struggling, they had decided that the entire inheritance would go to him. I felt an overwhelming anger rise inside me. Once again, I was being left aside, as if my life and my achievements had no value whatsoever. They continued to treat Marcus as the favorite son, the one who deserved everything, while I was seen as the one who was already too lucky. I spent days reflecting on this message, and each time I read it, my decision became more Anna. I didn't need their inheritance. I didn't need their money or their approval. The only thing I really wanted was to live in peace, without the burden of this toxic relationship with my parents. The final letter. I decided to write a letter to my parents. I didn't want any more confrontation or arguments. I just wanted to make it clear that from that moment on, I was going my own way without them. In the letter, I explained everything I was feeling. I told them about the hurts of my childhood, about how I'd always felt inferior and ignored. I also told them about how Marcus had been favored, and how this had made me feel like I was never really part of the family. Finally, I told them that Anna and I were expecting a child, but that I had no intention of sharing this moment with them. It was a difficult letter to write, but it was necessary. When I finished, I felt a huge weight lifted from my shoulders. I put the letter in an envelope and mailed it, knowing that from that moment on, my life would go in a different direction. The new beginning. Over time, the anger and resentment began to fade. Anna and I focused on the arrival of our son, and we built a happy life, without the interference of my parents or the past. The birth of our son was the end of a difficult phase, and the beginning of a new era. I knew that even without their presence, Anna, our son, and I would be happy. I finally had my own family, and that was all that mattered. It was the end of a cycle, and the beginning of a new story, this time written by me. And that was our story for today. What did you think of all this? Click the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any videos. Until next time, bye.